In a forgotten village where the land cracked under the sun and the air hung dry as old cloth, lived a girl named Nia. Her feet were always bare, her palms always blistered. Each morning before the sun rose, she fetched muddy water from the shrinking well, fed her silent, paralyzed father, lit the cooking fire, and headed to the fields where nothing ever seemed to grow. When she was just 8, her mother died. That was the day her childhood ended. Her laughter faded, her dreams folded up like paper and hid inside her. But late at night, when her father slept, she would lie beside a broken radio. The signal was weak, the antenna barely worked, and yet, through the static, a distant woman's voice would break through, calm and confident, explaining diseases, cures, and the workings of the human body. A doctor from the city. Nia would close her eyes and listen as though the voice was speaking only to her. She used to whisper almost without hope, "Maybe, one day." She had once wanted to be a doctor, but in a home where porridge was a luxury and school was a memory, wanting didn't count for much. Out in the field, bent over dry soil, her thoughts would wander to clean hospitals, white coats, and names on certificates. But her hands remained buried in dust, and the only thing she heard were crows overhead and the groan of her father's bed behind thin walls. Dreams in that place were things you carried quietly and buried early. One morning, while the sky was still pale and the fire not yet lit, her father spoke in a voice rough from sleep and time. There was a man, he said. His name was Musa. He ran a supply shop near the edge of the trading post. He had no family, but he had a house with a porch, a proper roof, and enough income to live without begging. He had made an offer to clear their debts, but in return, he wanted a wife. Nia didn't speak. She just swept the floor a little slower, and that evening packed her only good dress into a cloth bundle. The next morning, a clean donkey cart stood near the well. Musa sat upright in his wheelchair beside it, wearing a neatly pressed shirt and polished sandals. His beard was short, his face unreadable. No one said anything as Nia walked toward the cart. No neighbors called out. No friend reached for her hand. She climbed in. The wheels turned. The village faded behind her. When they reached his home, she was surprised. It was modest but solid. Painted shutters, a garden of cassava and tomatoes, even a chair on the porch. Inside, the rooms were swept, books lined the shelves, and a kettle hissed quietly on the fire. There were no smiles, but also no cruelty. He simply pointed to a corner where a mat and blanket lay folded. That would be her space. Then, without another word, he wheeled himself into the next room and closed the door. Nia stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to feel, not afraid, not sad, not angry, just hollow. The rain came without warning. It started as a soft whisper against the roof, then grew heavy, pounding like fists. Inside the quiet house, Nia sat curled near the fire. Her body trembled, sweat soaked her dress, and her eyes stared at nothing. Her hands clutched her stomach. The fever had crept in like a thief and taken everything, her strength, her breath, her voice. Musa heard her fall. When he found her, collapsed near the hearth, her face flushed and her body limp, a terrible stillness filled the room. He pressed his palm to her skin. It was burning. Without hesitation, he grabbed a shawl, threw it over his shoulders, and pushed himself into the storm. No umbrella, no torch, no time. The path to the clinic was rough even in daylight. At night, in the rain, it became a test of will. His wheelchair wheels sank into mud. Thorny bushes scraped his arms. Twice, he lost balance and tipped sideways. Once, he slid into a ditch. But he kept going. His breath was ragged. His hands bled. But Nia's face burned in his mind like a signal fire, and that was enough. At last, a dull light flickered in the distance. The clinic. He banged on the door with what strength he had left. A young doctor opened the door, stunned to see the soaked, trembling man in a rusted wheelchair begging for help. Musa didn't speak much. He only pointed behind him, back toward the village. The doctor understood. Moments later, they were on the trail together. One pushing, one guiding. When they reached the house, the doctor dropped to his knees beside Nia and opened his bag. The fever was high, but not too far gone. She could be saved. Musa stayed back, soaked and silent, watching every move as though memorizing it. That night, he didn't sleep. He just waited, heart tight, staring at the girl who once whispered dreams to broken radios. The fever broke just before dawn. Nia's breathing steadied. Her fingers twitched slightly. The doctor, after checking her pulse one last time, packed his bag and nodded. "She'll be weak for a few days," he said, "but she'll live." Musa didn't respond. He only exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight too heavy to name. When the doctor left, Nia remained asleep. Musa placed a bowl of water beside her bed, adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, and returned to his room in silence. The house was still for 2 days. Nia spoke little when she finally opened her eyes. Her voice was a whisper, her strength fragile, but she saw things she hadn't before. The way the room had been swept, the bowl of paw fruit by the window, the folded cloth beside her pillow. Someone had cared, quietly, without asking. One evening, as the sun melted into orange outside, they sat across from each other. The air smelled of boiling roots and warm millet. Nia, still pale, looked down at her hands. "When I was a child," she said, "I wanted to be a doctor." The words hung in the air. Musa didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared out the window. Then, gently, he said, "Why didn't you?" Nia gave a small laugh, dry but not bitter. "Dreams don't grow in empty stomachs," she replied. That night, she slept deeply. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. On the doorstep, Wrapped in brown paper and twine lay a small parcel. Inside it, a bus ticket to the capital, university application forms, and a short note written in crooked letters. "If you still want to heal," it said, "go. I'll wait." Nia held the note with both hands and cried, not from sorrow, but because no one had ever believed in her before. The city was louder than she imagined. Cars moved like restless animals. People shouted. Lights blinked without pause. And Nia, standing at the edge of a crowded bus terminal with her cloth bundle pressed to her chest, felt impossibly small. Her dress was clean but worn. Her shoes cracked at the sole. Her accent betrayed her village roots. But her eyes burned with something the city hadn't seen in a long time: quiet determination. At the university gate, she hesitated. Most of the students looked younger. Their bags were new, their English smooth. They belonged. Nia didn't, but she walked in anyway. Classes were hard, medical terms foreign, the city unforgiving. She shared a room with 3 others, ate plain rice from the charity kitchen, studied under a flickering hallway light when power went out. But she didn't stop. Every month, she wrote 1 letter, folded neatly, stamped in the corner, sent to a name with no surname: Musa, village, no return address. Sometimes she wrote long paragraphs, sometimes just a line: still here, still trying, still dreaming. She never knew if the letters reached, but she sent them anyway. In her wallet, the note he had left still rested, creased, stained, but never forgotten. "If you still want to heal, go. I'll wait." And when things got too hard, when exams loomed or homesickness bit into her ribs, she would take out that note and read it again. One evening, after 3 long years, she received an envelope with no name. Inside, a short message: "Don't stop, I'm still here too." For weeks, every letter she sent had the same quiet plea: "If you can, please come, just once, for the ceremony." She had no way of knowing if the letters ever reached him. There had never been a reply. Still, she hoped. Graduation morning came under a restless sky. Students filled the courtyard, wearing gowns too big for their frames, but dreams far bigger. Families crowded the seats, laughter, cameras, hugs. Nia stood alone, her name tag fluttering in the breeze. She looked once through the crowd, then again, no sign of him, and so she smiled anyway, because she had made it. The speeches began. The dean took the podium. Words of pride and perseverance echoed from the stage. Names were called, cheers rose, degrees were handed out. And just before the final few, the dean paused. "I've just been told," he said slowly, "that someone special is sitting with us today." The crowd hushed. He's not a student, but in a way, he's one of the reasons this university exists, for people like the woman he quietly helped and believed in. Murmurs spread. He's a former combat medic. He saved lives during the border conflict, suffered an injury that left him paralyzed, and never once told his story. The dean looked toward the back row. "I'd like to invite him, if he's willing, to help present these last degrees." Heads turned. There, in the last row, sat Musa, still, quiet, a stranger to everyone but her. Nia's breath caught, her eyes welled. He had come. As he was wheeled forward, the crowd stood, not for pity, but for respect, the kind reserved for those who never asked to be seen. Nia stepped onto the stage, knees trembling, and when she reached the dean, he stepped aside. Musa held out her degree, 2 hands, no words. She took it, with hands steadier than she expected, and leaned close. "You were a doctor all this time," he smiled. "Now, so are you." She turned to face the crowd, certificate raised, not to boast, but to breathe. And for the first time in her life, Nia didn't feel like a girl running from silence. She felt like someone who had finally arrived, carrying the weight of everything she'd lost and everything she'd become. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please give the video a like, share what you learned in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting tales like this one. Thank you for being part of the journey.